We are honored to welcome today's keynote speaker, Dr. Sarah Whittingham, a remarkable individual who embodies resilience, humility, and an unwavering commitment to growth. Her journey reflects the very best of what it means to lead with purpose, learn with intention, and inspire others around her. Dr. Whittingham is a University of Utah trained anesthesiologist, a U.S. Air Force veteran, an athlete, a wife, and a mother. In 2020, at the age of 46, she was diagnosed with young-onset Parkinson's disease. The first year, she suffered from anxiety and depression, gained 30 pounds, and was not sleeping well. She got to a point in early 2022 that she talked to her employer about going on disability. Through a series of events that included getting involved in a research study, investigating the effects of cycling on the progression of Parkinson's disease, a lot of hard work, and patience and understanding from her employer, Sarah got back into running and competing in long-distance triathlons and marathons. Sarah finished the 2023 Ironman Hawaii World Championships, was second in the Coordination Impaired Division at the 2024 Boston Marathon, and second in her division both in the 100-meter and 200-meter dash at the 2024 U.S. Paralympic Trials. Her story has been shared on the Today Show, Women's Health Magazine, USA Today, and the documentary on the 2023 Ironman World Championships. Sarah has used this platform to educate and inspire others living with Parkinson's disease, their care partners, and physicians. She is also working with National Veterans Affairs leadership and her congressman to advocate for post-9/11 veterans with Parkinson's disease and continues to work part-time as an anesthesiologist. Sarah will share her story and the lessons that she has learned in pivoting and adapting both in and out of the operating room. It is my distinct pleasure to introduce you to Dr. Sarah Whittingham.
Good morning. I'm Dr. Sarah Whittingham, call sign Yoda. Now let's be clear, I did not earn my call sign because of an act of Jedi wisdom or masterful use of the Force. I earned my call sign over 20 years ago when, as a brand new flight surgeon deployed to Malaysia with my F-16 squadron, may or may not have had a little bit too much gin one evening and puked on a dignitary, a Malaysian defense attaché. So Yoda is short for Yaks on Defense Attaché. Not exactly the call sign I had hoped for, but the name stuck. Through deployments, medical missions, and my entire Air Force career, I have been known as Yoda. For years, it was just a funny memory, a badge of humility and tradition. But like many things over time, its meaning has changed. And when I was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, that silly call sign began to mean something deeper. I had to learn to become Yoda, not just the wise, unshakable teacher I thought he was, but first, the flawed, stubborn, funny warrior who keeps showing up in the face of hard things, and then becomes the teacher who helps others to find the power of the light side. So I want to leave you with three things for my talk today. One, a new understanding of identity, that we aren't defined by what happens to us, but instead by how we adapt and overcome to the challenges that we face. Number two, the importance and the power of gratitude. That gratitude is the secret of harnessing the power of the Force. Gratitude and movement aren't just soft ideas, they're our lightsabers. And third, the joy of becoming the master and helping others to awaken the Force within them. The Force doesn't just guide us, it calls to us to lift others. And when we choose to share our stories, we offer hope and strength, and others can learn from our journeys. So to start with a couple of pictures and to explain this crazy outfit that I'm wearing. So back when I was a new flight surgeon in Korea, there were all sorts of crazy fighter pilot traditions. And one is Friday night at the squadron bar. And this is the JUVAC 88 Fighter Squadron party suit. So on Friday nights at the squadron bar, we had these polyester leisure suits with the flares. Everybody had to wear a make a call sign on here, state that I'm from. And it was expected that we wore these to the squadron bar. And it still fits, so I decided I needed to wear it. So this is some pictures of me from Korea, my fighter pilot helmet and an F-16. Later, after residency, I would go on to deploy to Afghanistan and serve 6 months as an anesthesiologist, taking care of American and Afghan nationals in Afghanistan. After that, I returned returned to the University of Utah, where I worked as an anesthesiologist until 2019, when our family moved to Cleveland, Ohio, because my husband had taken a new job. So there we were, living our very ordinary life, beginning of 2020 in Cleveland, Ohio. COVID hit, and like many of us, we were home staying home at school. Our dog may have had to get dressed up every day a little bit just because to keep us entertained. But life was just going on in our normal, boring, ordinary life. On the 4th of July 2020, we decided to take a family outing to the grocery store. Things were starting to lighten up, and it was socially acceptable to take your kids to the grocery store at this point. So, big social outing to the grocery store on the 4th of July. We're walking into our local grocery store in a suburb of Cleveland, and out walks a man wearing a t-shirt that says "Low to Jaw." And unless you're a serious cyclist and or from Utah, you would have no idea what Low to Jaw is. But Low to Jaw is a very competitive cycling race that takes place every year between Logan, Utah and Jackson, Wyoming, over multiple mountain passes, and is a very, very difficult race. And so having just moved from Utah and having liked to cycle, we stopped and we talked to this man. And we learned that he worked for Cleveland Clinic. I had just started working for Cleveland Clinic a couple weeks earlier. And so I wrote down his name thinking that, yeah, maybe we can connect sometime and he can show us some safe places to ride around here. And we went about our day. It was such a small, forgettable moment that, as you will see, not everything that feels small actually is. Because not long after that, my own adventure arrived, quietly and without warning. One evening, I was sitting on the couch with my husband, and he asked me, "Why is your arm shaking?" And I kind of looked at it, and I said, "I don't know, it just kind of does that sometimes." And my husband, who's also a physician, reminded me that that's not a normal thing, and that I was in denial. So like any good physician would do, I got on Google, and I asked, why do I have a one-sided resting arm tremor? And there was one article about Parkinson's disease that came up after another. And it was at that moment that my world just stopped. I had this flashback, like in a movie, where I flashed back to 20 years earlier, when as a brand new flight surgeon in Korea, my very first patient that I took care of was a young pilot who was about my age, who had just returned from Seoul. And he'd had some double vision while landing one evening, and had been diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. It was my job as his flight surgeon to ground him, effectively ending his flying career, and then become his advocate to see if there was any way to get him back on flight status. This was heartbreaking for me. Having just graduated from medical school, I could empathize what he was going through. Having worked so hard, he had dreamt of being a fighter pilot since he saw Top Gun as a little boy. And now, because of a medical condition, he would no longer to be able to do the job that he loved and had been dreaming of his entire life. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to help get him back onto flight status, and he was transferred off base to go fly remotely piloted aircraft, which for a fighter pilot is like a prison sentence. This has stuck with me the last 20 years of my career, and I had often thought back to that situation, especially as my own medical conditions arrived. But with the diagnosis of Parkinson's disease, I felt like a hypocrite, and that I would be able to go to work tomorrow, and nobody would question my abilities, whether or not I was able to practice safely. And it really bothered me that I was, had to basically end this guy's career, and nobody was going to check to make sure that I was safe to do what I do. This is a picture of our fighter squadron in Korea. The Jubats, 80th Fighter Squadron. That was probably the most wild year of my entire life combined. The next day, I met with the neurologist at my hospital. I worked at a small Cleveland Clinic regional hospital, and all the doctors know each other. I was able to track down the neurologist and told him I thought I had Parkinson's disease, and he kind of looked at me and said, "There's no way you have Parkinson's disease," but he was kind enough to pull me into a private room off the doctor's lounge, listen to my story, do an exam, and tell me that, yeah, I think that's probably what you have. We'll run some tests and go from there. I subsequently was referred to a movement disorder specialist who confirmed the diagnosis and started me on medication. I pictured my future based upon what I had learned about Parkinson's disease as a medical student 20 years earlier. I pictured myself on this downward trajectory with no control and nothing I could do about it. We know that Parkinson's disease is a neurodegenerative disease and that there's no cure. This is what I pictured for my future. At my Air Force Academy reunion the following year, I remember telling all of my classmates at the next reunion in 5 years that they could help me decorate my wheelchair or my walker, trying to make light of the situation. I I had succumbed to the dark side. I suffered from anxiety, and depression. I gained 30 pounds, and I wasn't sleeping well. One afternoon, on my way home from work, I fell asleep at a red light. And I had thought that if I am not able to stay awake driving home, then I'm not safe to continue practicing as an anesthesiologist. And so I tearfully called my boss, who connected me with the Cleveland Clinic Wellness Physician Advocate, and they decided to give me a month off work to meet with my physicians, adjust the medications, and we would readdress the situation in a month. This month was a godsend. It gave me a chance to step back, see what trajectory my life was on, and where I wanted to go from here. In addition, during that month, I was cleaning up some papers around the house, and I came across a handout that I had received at my very first appointment with my movement disorder specialist, which was at this point about a year earlier. And I had a list of research studies. And I started looking down the list of research studies, and there was one that had to do with cycling. And I started looking at it, and there was a name that stood out, Dr. J. Alberts. And I thought to myself, I know this name, how do I know J. Alberts? And so I couldn't figure it out, so again, I get on Google and Googled his name, and there's a picture of J. Alberts. And it was the man that we had run into in the grocery store 4 months prior to my diagnosis of Parkinson's disease. And he's the primary researcher on the study that studied the effects of cycling on progression of Parkinson's disease. I contacted his study coordinator and was enrolled in the study. I was randomized to receive a Peloton exercise bike for a year, a Garmin fitness monitor, and regular calls from a physical therapist, ensuring that I was riding it and encouraging me to ride it more and more. I was able to return to practicing anesthesia, the job that I love, and as I began to ride the bike more, I began to feel better. And so the force was awakened. In addition, 3 other key things happened that helped get me on the right track, and they all have a foundation in gratitude. Shortly after my diagnosis, in late 2020, I noticed that several of my friends had begun posting on Facebook about things that they were grateful for and why. And I noticed how much that lifted my spirits. And so I noticed that a lot of them were my friends from Utah or my friends from the Air Force who were LDS. And so I asked one of them, what is this about? Why are you all posting this? And they shared with me a video that their church president, Dr. Russell M. Nelson, who's a retired cardiothoracic surgeon, had made about the healing power of gratitude. And I highly recommend it. It's a very well done video. But in it he says that no matter what our situation, showing gratitude for our privileges is a fast-acting and long-acting spiritual prescription. In addition, I read all of Michael J. Fox's books. And the recurring theme in his books is also the power of gratitude. He frequently says that with gratitude, optimism is sustainable. And if we can always find something for which to be grateful, there's always a positive path forward. Also, shortly after my diagnosis, I received an email from one of my Air Force Academy classmates with a list of our classmates who had been recently promoted to general. It also included the list of every other person in the Air Force who had been promoted to general that year. And so I was scanning the list to see if I recognized any other names. And lo and behold was the name of this pilot that I had grounded 20 years earlier. And I was shocked. I was amazed that he was still in the Air Force and must be doing very well if he has made it to the rank of general. And so I was able to connect with him through friends, and we had a great conversation. We've had a few good conversations since then as well. He shared with me, he was very humble and grateful, and shared with me how his experiences he felt had made him a more empathetic and a better leader. He had gotten back to being able to fly the F-16 and was later trained to fly in the latest generation fighter jet, the F-35. He had served as wing commander and is continuing in the Air Force and moving up to this day. And so those 3 things, just his gratitude for me, because I'd always felt this level of guilt of being the person who had to ground him, even though that was my job, was incredible, and it just kind of felt like everything lined up. Coincidentally, the research study that I enrolled in was in partnership with the University of Utah. So I feel like that was some other intervention, and that on some level, if we'd stayed here or gone to Cleveland, I was meant to be in this research study. This is a short video about the study. It was part of the Ironman documentary that was made about my journey. I was super fortunate to come across this cycling trial that Dr. J. Alberts put together at Cleveland Clinic.
Yeah, early results of that study are very promising in terms of showing that exercise actually does slow the progression of the disease. And that's a big deal because to date, there haven't been any medications or surgical procedures that have been shown to be effective in slowing progression down.
I realized that the more I rode the bike, the better I felt. And so I continued to ride it more and more and more. And over the course of the study, I was, got up to riding the bike for an hour at a time. And I had the thought, if I can ride the bike for an hour, I can probably ride the bike for 3 hours. That kind of got me into the mindset that maybe I could finish a half Ironman.
We both ended up qualifying for the Ironman 70.3 World Championship in St. George. We decided that we needed to do more. She needed to do more. And then she started looking at the goal of doing the full Ironman again, something she hadn't done in 4 or 5 years.
I realized, too, that the people who were sharing their stories with me, that was helping me more than anything else. And so, going to In Motion and meeting other people my age who had been already living with Parkinson's for 10 years and were still there exercising, and that kind of got rid of that image in my mind that, I'm going to be using a walker in a couple years.
We are a complete wellness center for people with Parkinson's disease. Our wellness community is about physical wellness. It's about intensive training for specifics that you need for Parkinson's. We know that exercise is as powerful as a dose of medication for people with Parkinson's. We see it every day. We see people come in and change before our eyes. People with Parkinson's have the power to change their script. Period.
1, 2, 3!
So the force was awakened and the epic battle begins. My husband had signed up about a few months into the study. My husband had been training for a half Ironman at the time. He had signed up about 4 months earlier, and the race was still about 6 months away. And I decided to secretly sign up for the race. I didn't tell anybody because it still seemed like such a crazy idea that I would be able to finish a half Ironman. But I signed up and got to work training, and I continued to feel better the more and more I trained. And so the day of the race came, and everything went way better than expected. My initial goal was to cross the finish line alive. It eventually evolved to going under 6 hours, and then evolved to qualifying for the World Championships, which I accomplished all of those things, but most importantly, I beat my husband by 45 minutes. A few months after the World Championships, as I do every year, I was watching the documentary that they make about Ironman each year. And in 2022, they featured the story of Chris Nikic, who's the first person with Down syndrome to finish an Ironman. And I saw what a profound impact that his story had had on the Down syndrome community. And that if he was able to do this, that there's no reason that I might be able to help the Parkinson's community the same way. So I wrote Ironman, and I told them my story, and told them that it was my dream to make it to the finish line of Ironman Hawaii. This was in January of 2023. And I didn't hear anything back until August of 2023, 9 weeks before the race. Now, for anyone who's ever done an Ironman or done triathlons, they know 9 weeks is not really enough time to train for an Ironman. Fortunately, I had been training for a marathon at the time and wasn't in terrible shape, but I realized this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, so I said yes and got busy training. I also told my movement disorder specialist and Dr. Alberts at Cleveland Clinic that I intended to share my story at Ironman with the goal of helping and inspiring others with Parkinson's disease. And if they wanted to share my story through their media as well, that they were welcome to do that. They connected me with their media team. I talked to a member of their media team and told her my story. She was moved and asked if it would be okay if she shared this with her friends at the Today Show. I kind of laughed, thinking, wow, not really that interesting, but sure, why not? And lo and behold, they picked up the story. And so NBC followed me around for 2 days with a camera crew. I was able to go to New York, sit down with Yoda and Jenna, and share my story and raise awareness, help raise awareness about the power of exercise for people with Parkinson's disease. And when I got to Kona, this is just a quick clip about Kona. When I was first diagnosed, I didn't think that, I would even be able to run a 5K again. Just being able to be out there and push myself, I still love it. I feel the biggest goal that I could think of to accomplish when I just, is the finish line at Kona. And I'm so lucky to have this opportunity to do that, and hopefully share it with everybody else with Parkinson's and realize that we're all in this together and we can make a difference in each other's lives. So Kona was everything that I hoped it would be. I got through the swim. The bike was a challenge. Being on a bike for 7 hours with Parkinson's disease is a little bit, I got very, very stiff. So I would get off the bike at each aid station, kind of stretch and try to loosen up. It was a hot day, about 70 miles into the bike. I noticed that my cadence was slowing down and my heart rate was a lot higher than it should be. And so I pulled into an aid station, got off my bike. I had a hard time opening my medication vial because I was so shaky. The volunteers helped me with that. They packed my jersey with ice, asked if I needed medical attention because I must have looked pretty bad. And I said no, I just need a minute to get my heart rate down, cool down, and wait for my medication to work. They asked if they could say a prayer. We did, and then they helped me back on my bike, and I kept on going. When I got to a run, it took me a couple miles to get going. The first couple miles were a walk. I was able to run a bit. But having been going for about 12 hours at this point, I was starting to get tired. We were not allowed to listen to music during Ironman, and that was something that had helped keep my mind active. And so I started talking to people as they passed me to try to keep my mind alert and active, because I felt I was not really walking in a straight line at this point. And I met a woman from Australia who's an OBGYN doctor. And so for 10 miles, I walked with this woman, Tanya, from Australia. She had a very good pace going, and I learned all about the Australian healthcare system and about how tough Australian women are, and they don't need no epidurals. So that was an interesting thing for me as well. That was a very unusual, but that's not an expected part of giving birth in Australia.
We got to mile 25 of the run, and there on the corner was his dad. I say, you're a huge part of the reason that I'm here, is because I saw your story last year. And he grabbed my hand and he was held it so tight. He said, come on, you're okay, you gotta go.
Nothing, not even a Parkinson's disease diagnosis, can stop Sarah Lane in her mission to show it is possible with self-belief and an iron weight.
So after the race, my story was shared in Women's Health Magazine, USA Today, and on the Ironman documentary, which is a documentary there was an 8-minute clip with my story on that as well. In addition, after my diagnosis, I learned that one of my Air Force Academy track teammates, Jenna, had also been diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. She is also a physician and had also deployed to Afghanistan. We were in Afghanistan at about the same time, but at different bases, and had been diagnosed with Parkinson's disease the same month. And so we thought, we wondered if there was something to this. And so we started investigating it further. We found another woman who had been at the Air Force Academy at the same time as us. And I was able to connect with the lead neurologist for the VA. And after talking to him, I learned that they were not seeing a large number of younger people with Parkinson's disease in their system. Jenna and I had both applied for VA disability benefits after we'd been diagnosed and had been denied. We also had appealed the decision and been denied a second time, separately, by the time we connected. And so we thought of a few reasons why this might be the case, that the VA is not seeing a larger number of young people with Parkinson's. Number one, maybe it's just a fluke that these 3 women out of 1,000 have onset Parkinson's disease. Maybe younger veterans, we're still in the civilian workforce and aren't using the VA system yet, but we'll get there eventually. And 3, maybe we're being denied access to benefits. And so through a series of Freedom of Information Act requests, I learned that over 5,000 post-9/11 veterans have applied for VA disability benefits for Parkinson's disease, and over 2,000 of those have been denied. And so we started to look into it further, starting to raise awareness about this issue, and to work to change VA policy, which states that you're only eligible if you are diagnosed a year after diagnosis. I had served as an aircraft maintenance officer for 2 years prior to medical school at a base that's now a Superfund site contaminated with trichloroethylene. And I have no family history of Parkinson's disease, and I strongly believe that contributed significantly to my recognition. And so I began to advocate for others like me, because even though I know that I'll be okay financially, I know that many other veterans suffering with Parkinson's disease aren't going to be able to work to the age of 65 and are going to need help. And so Jenna and I have been working together to advocate and to raise awareness about this issue. Jenna was also able to come cheer me on at Ironman Hawaii. She brought with her her flag that had flown over Afghanistan, and this is her waiting to give me the flag to cross the finish line with. A few months ago, we were contacted by some environmental lobbying groups, and it never occurred to me that environmental lobbyists would be willing to help advocate for veterans' issues with Parkinson's disease. But trichloroethylene and perchloroethylene are two chemicals known to link to Parkinson's disease, cancers, and birth defects, and are the chemicals responsible for the devastation at Camp Lejeune. The EPA banned those chemicals in December, and it's expected to take effect in January, but it has been put on hold because some Republican members of Congress are bowing to industry demands to continue to be able to use it for manufacturing in their districts. And so we have been working to advocate to raise awareness of that issue. I actually just learned this week that the ban is going to go into effect, but we were able to continue to raise awareness through local media.
Two physicians and an aerospace engineer, all graduates of the Air Force Academy, who all served at least a decade.
So that's just a quick clip for that about just continuing to raise awareness about issues affecting veterans and Parkinson's disease. So we've been able to work together to continue to advocate for our veterans and ensure that they're able to get the care that they deserve. I've also have found great joy in inspiring the Parkinson's community and helping them to understand that we can take control of this disease, that we don't need to be on this downward trajectory, and that by finding gratitude and keeping a positive attitude, that we can continue to move forward in a positive way. And so I feel like I've found my inner Yoda, and that I'm helping others to become Jedi Masters themselves and find their inner light. I've started a website to help share this message. And on it, I share the stories of other incredible people with Parkinson's disease that I have met over the past few years. And I'm going to tell you about two of them now briefly. The first is Rhonda Fowles. Rhonda Fowles was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease in 1998. She tells the story that she basically went home and waited to die. She gained 100 pounds and was so unsteady on her feet that she was in a wheelchair. She ended up getting a deep brain stimulator, which at the time was still experimental in young people, and started walking and the weight came off. She had never been a runner before, but she decided to start running, and she explains that something just turned on in her brain. I met Rhonda at the 2024 Boston Marathon, where she was running she's finished over 100 marathons since that point, including Boston Marathon 11 times. And the thing I've noticed about people who are doing well years after diagnosis is that they're able to find gratitude and a sense of humor in almost any situation. The other example I'd like to share is Jules King, who lives in Great Britain. She began having symptoms of Parkinson's disease in her early 20s, and nobody knew what she had. She took 16 years to get a diagnosis, 10 of which she spent in a wheelchair. The last 2, she never got out of the wheelchair, said she couldn't even scratch her nose. She ended up somebody finally figured out that she had Parkinson's disease, and when she started medication, she started to feel better, and she began to exercise. Last year, she was 3rd in the neuromuscular division at the World CrossFit Games. So I think this just goes to show that, number one, we need to think of Parkinson's disease not just as old white men, but that it can affect everybody, and by using these stereotypes, it's having a negative impact. And that people with Parkinson's do have the power to move forward, which means we all have the power to move forward and do better. So Parkinson's didn't end my career, but it did force me to reimagine it. I'm still working as an anesthesiologist for now, and thanks to honest conversations and a supportive team, I've been able to adapt my hours and my caseload in a way that it allows me to continue practicing safely and meaningfully. I also recognize that I've been incredibly fortunate because I'm in a position where if I am told that I can no longer practice, it would not have financially devastated my family. I have excellent disability coverage, and I'm not the primary breadwinner. And because of that, I've had the freedom to walk into those conversations without fear, and instead being open about my struggles. But not every physician and not every person has that luxury. And that's what worries me the most. Because I know I'm not alone in this. I know that others are silently struggling. I know that many of us struggle from chronic illness, burnout, depression, and invisible hardships. And I know how easy it is to hide behind professionalism and perfection and to just press on, and to keep quiet for the fear of being seen weak or incapable. We work in a culture that rewards endurance and punishes vulnerability, and we push through and tough it out. But what I've learned is this, that courage doesn't always look like pushing forward at full speed. Sometimes it looks like hitting pause, speaking up, and asking for help. Sometimes it means talking with a trusted friend or colleague and with a conversation that begins, "I'm not okay." We need to create spaces for these conversations, not just for ourselves, but for the people who work beside us every day. Because no matter how strong someone seems, you never know what they're quietly fighting. And sometimes all it takes is one open door, one safe space to change the trajectory of someone's life. Parkinson's disease has changed how I practice medicine, but it's also changed how I show up for others. It reminded me that healing isn't just about making sure no one has to walk their hardest path alone, but that we're all in this together. Like Yoda, I've learned that leadership isn't always about having all the answers. It's about showing up with wisdom, empathy, and the willingness to walk with others through the unknown. I may not fly at full throttle anymore, but I feel that my work has given me even more power and more meaning by helping others learn to become Jedi Masters themselves. And now I see my mission more clearly than ever. So if you are struggling, please speak up. If someone near you is struggling, lean in, because we all deserve a chance to stay in the fight, and we all have the power to help others stay in theirs. As for me, I'll keep showing up, imperfect, shaky, and determined, and stubbornly hopeful, with my boots on and the force at my side. Thank you. One other closing video, just to end on a positive, silly note, because I don't want this to be funny. This is a video of me at the U.S. Paralympic Trials attempting to run the 200-meter dash for the first time. Actually, this is the second time. My first time using starting blocks. But an example of how some things don't go quite the way that you expected. But I told my husband that the day was a success because if my goal was to raise awareness about the challenges of living with Parkinson's disease, this was a huge success because many more people have seen this video in slow motion and every other because I fell on my face. So sometimes falling on your face is for the best.